Hey everyone, so this is Catfish. I'm not quite sure how many more episodes are in this particular season, but all I know is season 6, episode 13, called Johnny and Connor. So Nev and Max get the initial email saying from this guy named Johnny or Jonathan, who is 25 years old and lives in Northern California. He met this guy named Connor on Tinder 5 months ago, at least 5 months before the episode was taped. Or when yeah, I think. And they connected on this mental level and all of that. But then one day Connor falls off the map, and he falls off the map for about a month. That we find out a little later in the Skype call. Then recently he reappeared. Jonathan let it go, and then they reconnected. He is concerned that because he hasn't met Connor within these 5 months, that he is being lied to. So they call, or before the Skype call, I want to point out that Nev is thinking that this guy who wrote in seems an awful lot like this guy who was on the last episode of last season. And when they get on the Skype call, lo and behold, it actually is this guy from the season finale of, I think, pretty sure season 5. Johnny, he goes by Johnny, and he had catfished this guy named Andrew, and all that. So they have Johnny, count everything, and says Connor was gone for a month and all that. Johnny then tried to look up the pics on Google when Connor gives him his Instagram page, but doesn't get any hits. He has tried to get Connor to call him or whatever, but Connor's like refusing to do so and all that. They already have plans for the future, and he loves Connor already, apparently. Nev and Max then make their way to Monterey and go to Johnny's house. They don't really go easy on him because they believe he should know how a catfish's game works. Connor reminds him of his ex quite a lot, and then Johnny drops the bombshell that Connor is supposedly Cameron, his ex's roommate. They speculate that Andrew is behind it because he wasn't too thrilled to be on the show and he felt embarrassed. They also speculate it could be Cameron, but they don't know exactly why he would catfish Johnny at all. They then decide to go and investigate. They speculate in the car while going back to the hotel that Andrew and Cameron are suspects in the car, but they also reveal that they think Johnny is behind it, could be behind it as well. Johnny has sent information on Connor and Cameron, and before they check either's profile, they check the pictures and still come up with nothing. They then check Connor's number, which comes back as a Monterey number, even though Connor says he lives in San Francisco. And what really kind of made my spidey senses tingle is that Johnny lives in Monterey, and it makes no sense why Johnny wouldn't notice that the area code for Connor is a Monterey area code. Therefore, it stands to reason that whoever's behind it lives in Monterey. So it doesn't really make sense why he wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. So since he lives in Monterey, so I don't know. And they never really addressed that in the episode. So I'm just like, they may have, but they never show. If they did, they must have cut it out because I didn't see that. And so I mean, it just, I just don't know why they didn't confront him about the fact that he should recognize the area code, but I don't know. They then start to speculate that it's someone who saw the previous episode and wanted to mess with Johnny, which is, again, pretty spot on considering the end of the episode, but I understand why they didn't necessarily zero in on that one, because they had a whole slew of people that could be doing this. Neve says a reason Johnny could be making this up is because he wants to get back with Cameron, but because Cameron isn't returning his text or calls, decided to create this Connor just happens to live with Cameron to get Cameron to talk to him and hopefully get back together with him. We look at Cameron's Facebook page, which says he lives in San Francisco, but everything else is private. So they decided to call Cameron, but no one answers, so Neve leaves a voicemail. Then go back to Johnny's, thinking that they will go to San Francisco to confront Cameron. They explain that since they know Connor has said that he lives with Cameron, and know where that is, they could go to Cameron's place and talk with him. On the way to San Francisco, we find out Johnny apparently went to San Francisco for his birthday in January and asked Cameron to come out and meet him, but Cameron never showed up. And so he and Cameron were dating. We get this back about how he and Cameron were dating for about 2 months, and Cameron just started to avoid him and ultimately dumped him. They then share their information they found with Johnny, and then confront him about the possibility it's him who concocted this whole thing, and ask him if it's true, to which he says no. Once in San Francisco, they get to Cameron's house, and the landlord comes out. The landlord's name is Mark, I think he said, and they explain the situation to him. But he explains that Connor does in fact live there, but he does not have a roommate named Connor. He does have a male-female couple as a roommate, though. So Johnny then shows Mark the photo of Connor, but says Connor doesn't look familiar whatsoever. So they ask him to text or call Cameron, which he does, and leaves a voicemail. Neve, they all then go back to the car, and Neve's like, I don't think it's Cameron because he has no real motive to do it. And I mean, only motive I could really come up with was any reasonable explanations that he wanted to get Johnny off his back, but that doesn't necessarily get Johnny off his back though, so that didn't really make much sense, so I just let that one go. Neve thinks it's someone in Monterey because of the phone number and knows Johnny. So they again come back to that conclusion, but they don't necessarily give up the idea that Johnny's behind it either. So Max, when they get back in the car and start driving, Neve sees that he got a missed call from Cameron and then calls him back. So they pull over and talk to Cameron for a few minutes, and they explain the situation to him. Cameron says that Johnny and him texted a lot in the span of 3 months, but he feels he made it very clear that he didn't want anything serious with Johnny, but Johnny had forced both of them into hanging out together. At this point, Johnny gets upset because he feels like Cameron led him on through text, and led him to believe that they were in a relationship through the text message, and all that. So anyway, so the next day, Connor had texted back the previous day asking if this was really Catfish. So I text him to see if he's willing to talk on the phone, but says he can only text, not talk, which I was like, that's kind of typical. Since it's not Cameron, it could still be Johnny, but it also could be Andrew. Neve then asked to meet. Connor says he will send him just to meet them at. So Starts saying that it must be Johnny because of the fact that Johnny wouldn't, because the person wouldn't talk on the phone, so it must be Johnny. Then call Johnny and tell him what happened, and go to Johnny to wait for Connor to text. When he does, he asks where they are now and if they're with Johnny. So Neve tells him tells him and Neve tells him where they are, and so Connor's like, well, I know where he lives and I will be there soon. So, which is kind of indicative that it's someone that he knows. Or not kind of indicative, pretty indicative. So they go outside and wait for the person to show up. And lo and behold, it's a woman who comes up and they both know each other. Her name is Shanna, and she explains that she and Connor had a fling between August and September of 2015. The only reason why I came to that conclusion because I feel because the show this particular episode must have been taped 2015 or 2016, like I guess between August and December 2016, because if this episode was filmed and taped this year, and she had said that they had been, hooking up and stuff in between August and September of 2016, then that wouldn't jive with what she says a second later, where she says that she saw the episode with Johnny saying that he's gay. So that's the whole reasoning there. So if anybody's confused about the timeline, that's how I figured it out. But anyway, so between August and September 2015, they went on a couple dates, kissed, and apparently hooked up. So Eve and Max are all confused because and says, well, I thought he was gay. She's like, well, I thought he was straight. She then and so when she saw the episode, she was like, oh, I want to get back at him for leading me on. Max then sets Johnny straight by saying that he spent the entire previous day about how, oh, Cameron wasn't clear and should have told me how he really felt up front, and when he did pretty much the same exact thing to Shanna, and the whole reason for saying that was because she was like, I think he said something about how he felt embarrassed and all that, and she was like, well, how do you think I feel, and all that, and basically he was like, Karma's a bitch. Karma's gonna get you back, and I'm with Max on that. I truly believe that Karma will eventually get you, in what shape, form, or fashion, I don't know, but I truly believe that if you do something wrong to somebody, you will eventually get it back in spades. Like, you eventually will. So I'm just like, I was all for Max going in on Johnny, because he literally did spend at least what we saw from the previous day, that he did spend a good chunk of his time complaining about how, oh, Cameron didn't fucking give me the decency to tell me up front how he really felt, and he wasn't clear about anything, and it's just like I'm gonna kind of go in on Johnny myself, but I'm gonna wait till the end of the episode. Neve and Shanna then talk. Neve's like, well, like they talk outside while Max and Johnny and talk inside. So Nev and Max is like, Nev and Shannon are like, well, Cameron may have been leading Johnny on through text. Actions do speak louder than words, and since he and Shanna had more of a physical face-to-face relationship, it's understandable why she thought it was a relationship. John, sorry about that. Really sorry about that. So, inside, Johnny and Max are talking, and Johnny is like, well, I can't believe I did the exact same thing that Cameron did to me. So, Johnny's like, well, I'm gonna go outside and tell her I'm sorry because I never got the heartfelt apology in person from Cameron. So he does so, and, all's, and then she's like, well, I never really got an answer. And she's like, for what? And she's like, well, are you gay or bi? And he's like, well, I don't know. I never really explored my sexuality, explored in depth my sexuality. And then they just dropped it after that and then left. 2 months later, Shannon revealed she and Johnny are friends and hung out at a baseball game a few weeks ago. And Johnny, when they get to Johnny, he doesn't really have much of an update, so I'm not really gonna say much about him. But my thoughts on Johnny are, I honestly don't really believe him when he says that Cameron wasn't clear about how he really felt, because he's lied before. And he wasn't upfront about everything in this particular episode. Like he catfished someone. He catfished Andrew. I can't remember how long, but he catfished Andrew for at least a couple months. So, and he didn't even reveal himself until the end of the episode. And then he didn't even come forward with the information that Connor had told him, that he was his ex's roommate. And so he didn't reveal that information until after Nev and Max got to fucking Monterey in the first place. So, I mean, if he's not going to be upfront about information about someone who's supposedly catfishing him, why should I believe him at all? So I don't necessarily believe that Cameron didn't tell him at one time or another that he didn't want a serious relationship with Johnny. So I don't know. I really don't necessarily believe that that all of a sudden he just found out that Cameron didn't want a serious relationship with him when they had dated. So I don't necessarily believe that. I really don't. I'm sorry, but I don't. I mean, given his track record, I don't really believe him. So I don't know. That's just me. I mean, I'm not. I mean, I'm having a hard time believing him because of his past. I mean, honestly, if he wanted to be believed, he shouldn't have lied in the first place about anything. So, I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, but I just don't necessarily believe him about that. So anyway, that's my whole thing with Johnny. Next week on Catfish, it looks like someone has been catfishing for almost a decade. This is not the first time that we've had someone talking to other people, or one particular person or multiple people, for that length of time. There was an episode, I can't remember which season, but it was before season 4, I think, where the guy this woman was talking to this guy for about 10 years. and they had she had, you know, this boyfriend who had, either boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, who had committed suicide, and she felt like she blamed herself for the guy's suicide, and the guy she was talking to for 10 years helped her deal with that, or at least either mostly deal with that or completely deal with that or something. And they didn't end up together, but they did end up friends, I think, because they had like a uh, uh, what was it, a catching up with previous catfishes, or previous catfishers, recent, like in the last few weeks, like last month or something like that, and that they had them on that, you know, kind of reunion show. I guess you could call it, but I can't remember, for the life of me, I can't remember their names, but I remember the story, and I remember their faces. I just can't remember their names, because it was so long ago that they had that particular episode, and then I completely forgot the names from a few weeks ago, but so it's not the first time that someone's been doing like catfishing, I guess you could say, for about that long, but it doesn't seem to be as common, at least not on this show. What seems to be what seems to be a consistent thing is that they catfish people for anywhere from like 2 months to like no more than 5 years. That's kind of generous. That's kind of long and generous, in my opinion. But yeah, so that seems to be. So yeah, that is. And it seems like he might be real. This time around, like, in the previous episode I just mentioned, seems like he might be real. But who knows? So that's pretty much all I really have for this episode, and I will be back next week for Catfish. Bye.